What if the secret to success wasn't just talent or hard work, but unshakable confidence? Welcome to Grasp Confidence, the podcast where visionary thought leaders, speakers, and entrepreneurs unlock the mindset and strategies for lasting success. I'm your host, Tara LaFawn Gooch, CEO, two-time best-selling author, and international TEDx speaker, and I can't wait to help you step into the most powerful version of yourself. Let's dive in. Today on Grasp Confidence Podcast, I'm joined by Hal Blackwell, a writer and thinker exploring moral psychology, philosophy, and the hidden ways we deceive ourselves. From leading a successful insurance group and negotiating in private equity to helping individuals recover from addiction, Hal brings real world insight into how we justify our choices and construct meaning. He's an author and thought leader who approaches faith and belief with both intellectual depth and lived conviction. Hal, welcome to the show today.
Oh, well, thanks for having me on. I'm a huge fan.
Absolutely. Well, I want to talk about how you came to the show, how you're interviewed today. You were actually searching for you're in Charlotte, North Carolina. You were searching on your phone one day for podcasts. How did that come up, Hal? And then how
Yeah,
did you stumble on my show?
searching for a podcast and Tara Gooch popped up there. The I tend to think that there's no coincidence, only God keeping his anonymity.
That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's all it's funny how things work out, right? So you were
Yes.
looking for me. You're in Charlotte, not too far away from where I live in North Carolina. You were searching for podcasts. You saw mine. It stood out to you. You clicked on it and you reached out to me that same day through email. And, I think the week before, the 2 weeks before, something like that, I even said on a podcast, quote me on this, everybody. I said, if you email me, if you reach out, if you leave a review, I'll have you on the show. And then I met you a week later, not even a week. It was crazy,
Well, I wish I'd known that. That would have saved a lot of stress about me getting booked and everything. But
right?
I guess
I
that's
love that.
fortunate.
Well, thanks for reaching out. Thank you for showing your support, leaving a review. It means so much to me. But I want to talk about your story today. I want to talk about your life's journey a little bit because, we really hit it off on the phone after we talked. We had, a quick meeting and I said, this individual is something. He has really changed his life and done it in a way that we can all admire and learn from. So I would love for you to first tell us what you're doing now in this world. I know you're working on a book, you've got a lot of things going on. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing right now, and then let's go back a little bit and why you got started with all this. So what have you got working on now, Hal?
Well, right now, I'm working on promoting my book, The Most Important Thing You Don't Know. And I'm also a hypnotherapist that specializes in golf. And so I help
Oh,
golfer. Yep. It's a, been a passion of mine for, I guess, since I was 10 years old. But by using hypnotherapy, I'm able to instill confidence and performance under pressure. And it's through the fundamentals that I kind of just discovered researching the book. But I grew up in a little small town in upstate South Carolina called Union, South Carolina. Not many people have heard of it, but my dad worked for a textile firm there and just kind of had a normal, I guess, as normal childhood as you can have growing up in the 70s. They say that, if you claim to have grown up in the 70s and claim to remember it, you didn't. But
I like
I
that
was,
saying.
yeah. And,
Hilarious.
just was kind of partying on, somehow got my education and, I was 31 years old, and I just decided that, that lifestyle wasn't gonna be for me. And I've been raised in the Presbyterian church, and so I kinda, knew about God and was, I was a real God fan, but didn't really have a personal relationship. And after I quit drinking for about 5 years, I just kind of felt like, it's gotta be more to it than this. I mean, I just know something was missing. And uh, at that time, I was the president of Cornerstone Insurance Group, and I knew I was going to need a loan. And I played golf with my banker, and my banker went to this church where they actually believed the Bible. And so I thought that I would go over there and just check it out because, I wanted my banker to think well of me. And I went over there and I got invited to um, a a growth group. It was a Bible study of this material called sonship. And I walked in the room, and there's like everybody in there had a PhD except for me and my wife. Here I am, an insurance salesman, um, wondering what I'm doing there. And the assignment after that first Bible study was for you to pray that God would show you your sin. And I kind of had a hard time with that because, hey, I used to be this partier dude, and now I'm not a partier dude. I'm trying to be Ward Cleaver, and um, it, I was pretty good. I mean, if you didn't think so, just ask me. I would tell you how good I was. But that really changed my life because seeing my sin and seeing my character defects was really the germ of true gratitude. And the other real eye-opening or, you know, cathartic experience out of that was, um, an understanding of righteousness and how that plays such a very, seminal role in, how I think and how humans think and how that develops what's called my human dialectic. And so, just to kind of maybe give you an idea of what I'm talking about, uh, when I used to come home from work, one of my favorite or my requested experiences was to sit in front of the TV and watch the news. And I had 4 kids in the house, and that kind of amounted to a pipe dream. And I'm sitting there one night and I'm watching the news, and my 4-year old, I feel her eyes, looking around the corner, and she comes in, she crawls up, and she obviously has this news that she needs to tell me. And she says, "Dad, um, my brother's upstairs sticking his toys to the wall." All right. And I couldn't get a visualization of that. But when you can't imagine what's going on, you got 4 kids in the house, you kind of have to go investigate, right? So up the stairs I go, got the 4-year old right there behind me, and open the door, and there is my stepson, and he's got globs of Vaseline. He's smearing it on the wall. He's got Buzz Lightyear in his hand. He's getting ready to mount Buzz on the wall, and there's a jump rope mounted underneath the window, and this big oblong glob of
Oh my
Vaseline.
gosh.
And so, every once in a while, parents get, permission to have a meltdown, and we take it. I mean, it kind of feels like our duty, right? And so I start with the rhetoric and, "What are you doing? You know how hard it's going to be to clean up. You just wait till your mother gets home." And so, I mean, my performance was great. So I looked down at my 4-year old. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
right out of central casting, right? And
Yep.
so I looked down at my 4-year old, and she was enamored. I could see a euphoria was all over her countenance. And in that moment, the family snitch was born. the
Yep.
stool pigeon of all stool pigeons. And
Yep.
she started ratting out her older siblings at every opportunity. And it baffled me because why was this 4-year old who worshiped her older siblings? I mean, she imitated them. She wanted to do what they were doing. She wanted to be where they were, but she'd rat them out and they'd be angry and, but their ire was no deterrent. And I started thinking about that. And it occurred to me, she wasn't going to be the fastest. She wasn't going to be the smartest. There was really no superlative available to her other than most obedient. And so she sought that obedience out at 4 years old. And that was her claim to fame. And I look back through my experience and, I met this guy on a consulting assignment in Greenville, South Carolina. And he was known in the company as a neat freak. And I pulled in the parking lot one morning. He's standing there with a half-eaten apple in his hand that he had just found in the smoking area. And John, John says, um, this has got to stop. We can't have this. And John had spent his early 20s in prison where he became a neat freak. He's a very good employee. And he was so clean that he volunteered to construct the test that people would need in order to eat in the smoking area. Made everybody in the whole company mad. And John wasn't going to be able to, be recognized as the most intelligent. The only superlative available to him was cleanliness. And, very much like my daughter's tattletale righteousness, John was getting some cleanliness righteousness. And you look today at the news media. I mean, the conservatives sit there watching Fox News, getting their point of view reinforced, and the liberals are watching the mainstream media doing the same thing and getting political righteousness. And that led me into doing a lot of um, research in philosophy because I'm noticing this. I mean, certainly I wasn't the first one to notice it. And as I went back and looked, I mean, it's really the thing that drives us is that need for righteousness. And
Mhm.
of course, as a Christian, if I can acclimate the faith to claim Christ's righteousness, then I don't have to go out and seek it other places. And just trying to focus my life in that direction has really changed how I see things and really how I love people because when you see someone's righteousness scheme, and we all have them, we got our little thing, and
Yes,
just
we do.
yeah,
We
yeah,
do.
and
Wow. That's interesting. What an interesting story. This goes into a keynote that I'll be delivering in May at the C-Suite for Christ Savior Summit. Um, you know, at the end of the talk is about stepping into your calling with confidence, becoming the leader that God designed you to be, right? And I use examples like Ruth and David. But, towards the end, we're talking about, our purpose. And I get clients, I get listeners on this podcast, I get people on social media, they DM me and they say, this is, something I want to do, but it's not possible. And I give them counterintuitive advice. I'm like, you know what? You're right. It's not possible to beat addiction on your own, right? It's not possible sometimes to start a business with no funding and no support. But it's when Christ is in you, right? When you have um, a righteousness to fulfill a purpose, a calling, when Christ is in you and resides in you, it does make the impossible possible. So I kind of like where you were going with that, right? And it's interesting though. You have a different take about righteousness than I feel like is traditionally what we've heard. So, why do you think, Hal, that we all have this like one particular thing? Do you think people have one thing? Do you think people have more than one thing? And why do you think people have these areas of righteousness? And what does it mean?
Well, if you think about righteousness as the one pan of the scale against guilt and shame. Okay, I mean, you go back to the very beginning, Adam, the fall. He experiences shame, and he puts on clothes, and so
Yep.
we all deal with shame, and how we
Yeah.
deal with it determines our righteousness scheme. You know, hey, I'll admit I got some golf righteousness, and it doesn't it doesn't make me angry for, to admit that. But if you want to know what your righteousness scheme is, just think about what makes you angry. Because if you want to make somebody angry, you just dicker with their righteousness scheme, buddy. I mean, some people live vicariously through their kids. Um, it is, you know, Adam put on a fig leaf. We have brought it to an art form, and
Ooh, I like
yeah,
that. That's interesting.
and see the other part of it is that I think that in maybe the last 50 years, guilt and shame have been the arch enemy. Okay, I mean, battling
Yeah.
guilt and shame, the righteousness thing, but we have people who don't suffer guilt and shame. We call them serial killers, all right, and
That's true.
or sociopaths or psychopaths,
Yes.
and
Narcissists, right?
right, and we when I was growing up, I mean, there was a stigma, and people thought that was bad, but in a certain way, it brings a an accountability that I think that people who have who are moral relativists, if it's okay with you, then it's okay, and kind of the decline of our culture, I would assign to that particular point of view. And so praying to see my sin, that's going to bring guilt and shame unless the forgiveness of Christ isn't sitting right there beside it. You see, I mean,
Absolutely, 100%. Amen to that.
yeah.
Again,
And
the
so, I
only
mean,
way through is through him. And that's something I wanna stress because I don't like this term self-help, Hal.
yeah, I
We
don't
have
like it
to
either.
that's
Yeah,
why
hey,
birds of a
helping
feather
myself got me in a batch of trouble. I'm gonna tell you.
birds of
Yeah.
a feather flock together. I do not like that
uh,
word because it implies that you can figure all of this out by yourself. You don't need anybody else, and that is profoundly untrue, isn't it?
oh wow. I mean, my life is a perfect example of that. I mean,
All of our
there,
lives.
yeah, I mean, you just feel like you're out there fighting a battle, just one day
Yeah,
after another. And
yeah,
you really just aren't getting anywhere. And if you get somewhere, then you don't have anybody to share the victory with. I mean, it's lonely. And um, we were made for community. And
yeah,
see, that's the other thing that, people, i- in my experience, there's no clue that someone lacks self awareness as the statement, well, I don't care what anybody thinks. Well, we do care what other people think. I mean, we perceive ourselves um, by what we think other people think of us. We spend a lot of time, you know, accumulating stuff and posing so that other people will like us, and
Yep.
that that's a, a bondage of self, is what I like to
Mm.
talk about. It's a bondage of self.
That's interesting. How do we I mean, how do you overcome that? I think, for a long time, I relied on external validation and approval, people pleasing. I think a lot of people can relate to that. It's not easy, again, it's not that you'll always care what people think of you to a certain extent, but I guess, yeah, there's no really divorcing it 100% out of your life, is there? I like to think there is, Hal, but you're right. I don't know if that's possible.
Well, one of the things that has helped me is to accept the fact that I'm human, you know?
Right.
And,
Yeah.
y- when I'm sitting there and I'm trying to be somebody that I'm not, which is, I spend a lot of time doing that, refusing to accept my humanity.
Yeah.
And the really cool thing about um, that I found in philosophy, there are these two guys that have more to do with the way that we see ourselves. And you've probably never heard their names. The first guy is a guy named David Hume, and he was a Scottish philosopher who I think he died in like 1776, you know, famous year. And Hume took, he came out of the Enlightenment and he was an empiricist and he produced this work that was really the first cogent um, explanation of how God doesn't exist. All right. And so, man, and a
Really?
lot of his stuff was yeah. A lot of his
Wow.
stuff was published after he died because he was an atheist. And
Mhm.
he inspired this guy named Immanuel Kant. And Kant came back. Hume said that, hey, we're born and we're a blank slate. There's no, our experience is what we are, and we're just a glob of perceptions based on our experience. And, you know, Aristotle said that we think about or we make decisions based on what are called syllogisms. And a syllogy, an example of a syllogy is, Aristotle is a man, men are mortal, therefore Aristotle is mortal. And, that logic, that's how we build our dialectic. Well, fast forward to um, a guy, I'll get back to Kant in a second, but fast forward to this guy named Hegel. So Hegel says that the way that we make decisions isn't like Aristotle. And Hegel said that what we do is we have a thesis and then an antithesis. And then we um, come to a conclusion from those theses. Like, for instance, if I were to say to you, Sunday's the best day of the week, the way that you would analyze that is that you would um, say that Sunday's not the best day of the week. And you don't really realize that you're doing that, but you do. And the way that we build our dialectics is around age 2, we start doing this thesis and antithesis and then synthesizing that into a tree of beliefs. Okay. And that tree of beliefs starts to, as our tree begins to grow, we start developing blind spots because when we have experiences, um, we try to fit them into our dialectic. When we see things happen, the last thing we want to do is to change our dialectic, you know, because we don't want to admit we're wrong. And so we try to squeeze it in there. I mean, for instance, like I deal with people who are trying to recover from substance abuse. And if you've ever had an experience of trying to speak to someone who obviously has a problem but won't admit it, um, that person isn't lying. They really think they don't have a problem. When I talk to my little 4-year-old, how do you talk to someone who's 4 years old about the moral turpitude of being the family snitch? I mean, in her mind, she was just keeping the house rules. You know, John was just keeping the smoking area clean. In his mind, he had no idea that a righteousness thing was behind it all. And that is how, blind spots develop. And so what Immanuel Kant, in response to Hume, you know, Kant said, Hume, you're right, except for one thing. And he said that um, as human beings, we are all programmed, we're all limited. And that's a very important concept. That we're all limited in that it's like on the internet, we interact with the apps, but we don't see the workings of the internet behind it. And Kant said, every um, culture on the face of the earth believes in the morality of do unto others. It also believes in the morality of, if everyone in our society acted as I do, could the society endure? And so the thing that I missed for so long was the limited part. I had the Jesus part and I had the forgiveness part. And I can remember on a previous podcast when you were talking, I think it was with Mr. Hanson, and you were
Mark
talking
Victor
about
Hansen?
how yeah, and you were talking about how you put a sticky note on your computer saying that, you would sell so many books or
Yep.
whatever. And um, to me, that was the perfect example because you were not accepting the limitation of how many books you could sell, but you were accepting the limitation of being human and that you needed a reminder.
Oh, yeah, for
Yeah, you
sure.
see,
We all do, by the way.
yeah, we all do. We all
We
do.
all do.
And for so long, I knew there was probably something missing, but I didn't get this limited part. And I guess the hard part of my life is learning where the limitations are and where they aren't. Um, it's it's just the quandary that baffles me, and
Well,
that kind of led and
yeah, I think it's really important though to self-examine because a lot of it what some of this sounds like is like attachment and holding on
oh yeah,
like ego as well, like ego, growing your ego, nurturing your ego, but then also super attachment. And I think that's really important to for us all to just have that reminder of it's easy to get attached to an outcome, but let's just say in goal setting, for example, I say this or better. I don't have
right.
attachment necessarily to a specific outcome. That outcome is God's job. My job is to deliver, in the case of a book, a really thoughtful book that adds a lot of value to others. I have a high intention, I have a high integrity for it, but I'm not so attached to the outcome, but I have a reminder and anchor to keep me going. I think that's important. Anybody can benefit from that, right?
Oh wow, that is the very focus of the hypnotherapy that I do with golfers.
Yeah.
What
I
I
love
try to
that.
do, yeah, see, what I try to do is divorce that golfer from the result of his swing. All right. Everything that's going to happen that's within your control is going to happen right in front of you. And if the shot, a gust of wind comes up, blows your ball in the water, don't let that poor outcome defeat you on your next shot. And just to focus on, the outcome's God's business. And my job is to do what I can do. And what's really kind of very integral in that is this notion of imagination. And, I never realized how integral the imagination is in how I perceive myself, how I perceive the world around me. And I heard an interesting illustration of this about this guy who took his dim-witted brother-in-law with him to pick up his car that was in the shop to have a tail light repaired. And he pulled the car out and he wanted to make sure the tail light was repaired. And so he asked his brother-in-law to get behind the car and let him know. And so he turned the car on, turned the signal on. He asked his brother-in-law, you know, is is it working? And his brother-in-law said, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And the reason that he couldn't put together that association wasn't due to a lack of intellect, it was due to a lack of imagination. And I'm a huge C.S. Lewis fan. And C.S. Lewis said, reason is the natural organ of truth. Imagination is the natural organ of meaning. And
Ooh, I
so,
love
yeah, I mean, that's pretty profound. And so, really, what I started trying to understand was how much care am I giving my imagination? And how much am I paying attention to what kind of information I take in that pollutes my thinking in a lot of ways? I mean, we talk about guarding our hearts and things like that. And um, it's very, very important, in my opinion. I mean, it's just turns out to determine the essence of who we are.
that. Wow. It's so profound. And so I don't know, it's so freeing as well too, Hal. For me it's we were talking about detaching from the outcome. That is the most freedom some of us will ever experience in our lives. When you're so attached to the outcome, that's when you're striving. That's when you're hustling. That's when you're not aligned. But when you're attached to only the intention and the integrity of whatever it is you're doing and you detach from the outcome, you leave that to God, it's such freedom. And it's true faith as well. And what I love about what you're saying and what I it also complements, my message. It's very fit there's a lot of philosophy in it. I've read the works
Wow.
of Descartes, Spinoza, Hegel, Emerson, and it really does expand your thought, and the simplicity of it is that, again, through faith, through a discerning heart, all of these things are possible, which I think is amazing. And the
Yeah.
imagination part of it too is so key to becoming
Yeah.
like whatever you wanna become, including having your place in God's kingdom and expanding God's kingdom, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's saying that Jesus saved. I mean, Jesus saves. Having faith in that is not nearly as hard as having faith in Jesus has saved. You know, I run around and act like, hey, I don't have the righteousness of Christ. I got to depend on this outcome in order to
Yeah.
get my righteousness. And And that's again an element of bondage of self, where
Bondage itself. Yep.
yeah, when that outcome determines who you are, I mean, you're a prisoner. I mean, there's no freedom in that. Um, and it restricts your creativity. It just and I struggle with that. I mean, that's one of the things that I really have to pay attention to daily. And I try to start my morning out every morning in prayer. And it occurred to me not too long ago that what could be more what could kickstart my imagination more in the morning than sitting there, being on my knees and praying to God. It demands a certain, element of imagination. I mean, faith and, imagining um, what God wants and what God can give. I mean, it's self-limiting. If I don't do that, if I'm all about Hal and what Hal can do, and it's just so counterproductive.
Mm. Wow. I once heard somebody say that faith is certainty beyond logic. Our logical containers, these brains, right? They're great for survival. But
Right.
it's right? It's that discerning heart. It's a heart posture. That's kind of how I look at it. That you have to have a heart posture that's open to the reception of this. I think this, God is obviously everywhere, and I do like to think that His hand is always extended to help us and to be there for us and to guide us through something. But ultimately, we have to have a heart posture to accept it. Don't you think?
Oh, well, I've not thought of that term, but I'm I'm stealing that, heart postures.
You can steal it, Hal. I'll let you.
Yeah, I'm taking that. Um, yeah, the a heart posture. I mean, I'll have to just frankly and transparently, my heart posture doesn't get right until I've almost tried everything else. I mean,
Same.
sometimes I just yeah, I mean, I'll try, just get my nose to the grindstone and
Yep. Yeah.
just, spin my wheels out. a- and then when I've tried everything, you know, I'll say, well, God, here I am, God. And then things work out. And then I
You
just
have you
go
have
on
to
and
surrender, don't you? I mean, I
yeah.
think that's part of it. I think God looks at us sometimes. Do you remember when your kids were little? I know you say you have 4 kids, right? So when they were
Mhm.
little and they were just learning how to walk and they would trip and fall, and you'd be like, "Oh my gosh, just do this one thing," or "Just let me help you," or just. And they did it and they tripped and they falled and maybe they cried, maybe they got right back up, maybe they wallowed in their own misery, who knows, right? But
Mhm.
you're just standing there smiling the whole time because you know how short this phase is gonna be. You know how perfect they are at that moment, right? They're just trying. And I feel like God is almost looking at us. I mean, He's our Heavenly Father. He's looking at us like that too. But He does expect us to get back up. There's a really good analogy of this. The bird, they're comfortable in the nest, but they're not meant to stay there their whole lives. They have to
Yeah.
fly, right? And God gives the sparrows, it says, God gives the birds of the air food to eat. They're satiated, but they have to get out of their nest to get it. He doesn't deliver it in the nest. They have to jump out, they have to take action. They have to have faith in their own wings and have faith as well that worms are going to be there or food's going to be on the ground when they get there.
Yeah, I mean, it all comes back to faith.
It
I
all
mean,
comes back to
it
faith, yeah.
it's like, Abraham, he he believed and God credited righteousness to him because he believed.
Yeah.
You know, Jesus says, "You believe in me, you get my righteousness." And that faith is, you know, the heart posture of that faith element. You know,
Yeah.
it's everything. If I'm sitting there and I'm in the nest and I don't want to get out, it's because I'm afraid. And,
Yep.
you know, fear is the opposite of faith. And, you know, it's just like a vessel where there's not faith, there's fear. Where there's not fear, there's faith. And it's all about believing. It's all about believing. Um, and that doesn't mean, you know, God, I, if God brought the worms to the nest, I mean, how much fun would that be? Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
they wouldn't be what would
yeah.
they
I mean,
why do they have wings, right? Why do they have wings? Why do they have a they wouldn't be fully alive.
right. Exactly. And the thing that I think people live their lives backwards. They're just out there trying to get things that are going to make them happy. When if they would get happy and they've got everything they need to be happy, I don't care where you are, what your circumstances are, you have everything you need to be happy if you can have the faith that God's there and that God has a plan for you, then, you know, get happy and the things that you need will come to you uh, because you're not, it's kind of paradoxical, but getting happy and getting out the nest, that's what it's all about. Yeah, I
That's
mean,
what it's all about. Yeah. And these things may come in our life, adversity, hardship, trauma,
oh, it's coming.
pain. It's coming. It's like but, I it's these things are just refining us, right? For the bigger mission, the bigger purpose that God has for our lives, which only truly he knows. But I like to tell my clients as well, all the time. I have Christian coaching clients, and we talk about this. God is a refiner of silver. And, if you ask a silversmith, what do they do to refine a silver? They put it in the hottest part of the flame, the hottest part, burn off those impurities. And the silversmith knows when the silver is done, when he can see his image in it. These adversities that we have are not separating us from God, they're revealing God within us. And when we, as believers, believe that Christ is in us, what can't we do? Again, use your imagination to make something amazing out of your life.
Yeah. I mean, there was a book not, you know, several years back. It's called Secrets of the Vine. And it was talked about how God prunes and the
Mm,
prune,
yeah.
you know, the pruned shrubbery grows much, you know, to a much more luscious foliage. Um, and when you have a heart posture of faith, then you do benefit from that. But if you don't have faith, man, that's a pretty rough life, you know? I mean,
I know that all too well.
all
I've
too
been there,
well. I
done that.
mean,
Yeah, all too well.
see, you know, all of that bad stuff becomes a commentary on who we are. I mean, you know, we let the world tell us who we are. We let other people who don't think well of us tell us who we are outside of faith and, you know, outside of that heart posture. It's,
I love that. I'm so
yeah,
glad
I
that
mean,
resonates with you. That's how I
it
look at it.
does.
I
I
do.
mean,
I look at it, yeah, as a heart posture, and we look at somebody like King David in the Bible, totally overlooked, right? It's hard to even call him an afterthought because that would mean they thought about him at all. But right? There was that
yeah,
he wasn't even an afterthought. So, but he had a heart posture, and what I love about his story, I love a lot of things about his story actually, but
Oh, me
that,
too.
the man sees the outward appearance. Man, in his righteousness sometimes, right? In his flaws, over righteousness, sees all the things that are wrong with somebody else and doesn't recognize the heart of the individual. It's not to a fault of our own. We're not readers of hearts. Only God can read a heart. But I think something to examine for all of us is, what is your heart posture? What is your intention on something? And for what purpose?
Goes back to motive, I mean,
Motive, yeah,
you can do
intention.
yeah, I mean, you can do something and it be wrong in one sense and right in another. Depends on your motive. Um, and hey, see, that is another thing that really clouds our ability to evaluate our motives is this righteousness thing. If we have
Yeah.
to, yes, if we have to find ourselves to be righteous, then how can we be, really clear eyed about what our motives really are? You know, it goes back to my daughter and John. They just they couldn't see their motives because they needed that righteousness.
Yep, and it's like what Jesus said to the Pharisees in his day, that they were like whitewashed tombs. On the outside, it was beautiful. On the inside, they were filled with dead man's bones and uncleanness. So, it's about, again, we can focus a lot on that outward appearance and try to please others and satiate other people and make other people feel comfortable or make them believe that we are somebody or not somebody. But no, all of that is vanity. It's what's in your heart. It's what's in your heart. And while other people can't read your heart, other people can feel an intention. And it's
Yeah.
an energy, I feel like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, it's like every other religion on the face of this earth is about how to get righteousness, about, how to perform
Exactly.
something to get to be declared righteous. The
Yeah.
distinctive of biblical Christianity is, I believe and get righteousness through belief.
Through
And
belief. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's like being under the law. I mean, Romans 3:20, no one will be declared righteous by observing the law.
Thank gosh.
Romans, yeah,
Right?
yeah, right, yeah,
We would all be
or
doomed.
right. And Romans 5:20, you know, the law was given that sin would increase. I mean, how many people know that the law was given that sin would increase? I mean, it goes back to the guilt and shame.
Yes.
The proper use of it is to see our need for God. If the law didn't exist, I wouldn't need God. I mean, who would need God? And it's this liberation of this righteousness burden and this heart posture of love. I mean, at the
Love.
end of the day,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's what we all want, right? We want to love and be loved. And if I'm sitting there and I'm trying to fight you for righteousness, if I'm sitting there trying to suck approval from you, how can I love you? And it just goes back to the genius of scripture. I mean, there's no way man thought that up. You know?
Definitely not. It goes
Yeah.
against it goes against so many things, if you look at it, um, it a human would not write that because it goes against every natural inclination humans have almost.
And
But I love that,
man, that's
at the end of the day, the answer is love because God is love and created everything with love. The answer is not destruction, the answer is not war or any of that or division. It's love. And that
Not a new
and
car.
it's not a new car, it's not, and all of
Not a
these
bigger
things are there's
house.
right, and they're not bad in themselves. It's not that, but is it ever going to complete you? The answer is no, because once you have everything, you're going to want something you can't buy with money. And then
Exactly.
it turns out that the answer was all along and it was right in front of you. And it's again really when you allow the Holy Spirit to fill your life, when you allow Christ in your heart, and when you walk in his ways as much as possible. It's not about being perfect, it's not about performance. It's about it's literally about every single day asking yourself, "Who is Jesus Christ and how can I be more like him?" That's it. And if every single one of us, every single day, became a little bit more like Jesus Christ, we can all agree the whole world would be a better place. We'd all be more fulfilled and happy, and we'd all be a lot richer in blessings.
Yeah. The reason I can't be like Jesus is a lot of times my faith gets weak. If my faith was perfect, I could be, I could do a lot better than I do now. But
Yep.
yeah, I mean, I just can't imagine doing life without that understanding. I mean, I did it for 31 years. Um, and boy, what a hollow existence.
Well, it's yeah, praying for people that are in that position that you were once in, right? Because we've all been there. I talk about it in my next book really openly as well. I'll share this quick story with you because this, coming to faith, this level of faith for me is relatively new in my journey. When I was in college, I had to take a required religious class. And at the time, I was very not interested in religion at all. And I threw the Bible in the trash. If God can meet me where I was, a person of no belief, he can reach your heart too. I think the question is, do you want him to?
Well, I'm just speaking from my experience. I didn't really want him to. I mean,
Yeah.
I wanted to be anything but a Christian. Please don't make me a Christian.
It sounds so
And
boring, doesn't it?
yeah, I know, right? I mean, how boring. So, and
Right? How boring.
I mean, I got in a corner. You
Yeah.
know, when I got cornered and I had no other option, that's when I got humbled so that my mind could open up and just say, God, I've tried everything. I can't do it. If
Yep.
you're
Yep.
real, if you're up there, here I am. Yeah,
I love it.
and, that's kind of where it kind of got me. So I don't know how much credit I can take for my salvation. I mean, I just feel very lucky. I don't know. I
Oh,
just hey, I can guarantee you, I'm not a Christian because I'm smarter than all non-Christians, and I'm not a Christian because I've suffered more than all non-Christians. I am a Christian by the grace of God. I mean, that's just, um, yeah. I mean, I guess I wanted it, or I wouldn't have been, you know, susceptible to the Holy Spirit. But man, in my conscious mind, oh, I don't want to be a Christian.
yep.
Boy, they're boring. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
What a
Absolutely.
what a fool. Um,
Yep.
yep. I just couldn't see it. I mean, my righteousness depended on me not being a Christian. I mean, I don't want to be one of those stick in the muds.
Yep. And then all of a sudden it takes over you and gradually, right? Your life starts to change. For me, it was starting to not want to do the things that I used to want to do. The
Yeah.
things that once got me excited that now I question, like, "Why am I doing that? Is that really honoring to myself or others?" And before I never questioned it. And it kind of opens your eyes a little bit, lifts the veil, I guess, to a certain extent, and makes you see things in a different spiritual lens. At least
Oh yeah.
that's how it was for me. I can't speak for everyone. But then just, yeah, being receptive to transformation. I think, well, one of my favorite parts in the Bible is where it talks about when you believe, when you accept Jesus into your life, you are essentially, born again. You're made into a new creature. I like the way it frames that new creature. You're
Oh
made
yeah.
new. And it this like change, that's what I said before, in the start of the podcast. This change by yourself is not possible. And true transformation is not possible unless you have that personal connection and relationship with God. That's the only way true transformation is actually carried on successfully, right?
Yeah. I mean, kind of what turned my curiosity on is that I didn't know what the Bible said. I mean, I'd been raised in a Presbyterian church, and I thought that, hey, good people go to heaven. But I had this guy ask me. He said, "Well, how good do you have to be? I mean, you have to be in the top 50%. You have to be in the top 90%." And I couldn't really answer that question. And so, hey, after the partier that I was, and the way I had turned my life around, or my life had been turned around, hey, I was in God's top 10%. I mean, I felt like I was, maybe I was, I don't know. Um, but it wasn't until I understood this righteousness through faith, and that, I wasn't going to get to heaven by being better than everybody else, and that was the thing that just made me want to read the Bible.
Yeah. It's not about being better than anybody else. It's not. It's about being faithful. It's about believing that Jesus died on the cross for you so that you could be saved. It's about believing that there's, a God that loves you and created you in his image. I think that's easy for us to forget as well, but we're all image bearers. And that's really special. That's unlike anything else he's ever created. And he's created a lot, but another image bearer, no,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
special. So we are special. Our life it matters. And I think that I challenge anybody today to just develop that, again, that heart posture of love and forgiveness, and allow the reception of God, and see how your life could change very quickly. Again, it doesn't take a long time because the Holy Spirit really gets to work, right? It's
Yeah.
God's active force, active. It gets to work pretty quick. And as long as you have a heart posture of love and forgiveness, um, you'll not only be one of those people that are in God's favor and, make it to heaven, but you're also going to be one of those people that can change the world and somebody else's life right here, right now. So I think that's important. Starting with your own, by the way. Starting
Yeah.
with your own
Yeah.
life. What a honor to interview you today and learn a little bit more about righteousness, learn about imagination, learn about faith, and do this deep dive. I'm sure it's going to be very valuable to a lot of people. Where can everybody find you and look you up online?
Uh, thehalblackwell.com. And
TheHalBlackwell.com.
yeah, some dude in China stole Hal Blackwell, so I had to go with thehalblackwell.com.
I kinda like it. Everything's meant to be, right? It's meant to be.
I guess that.
I like
Yeah.
the Hal Blackwell. It sounds really exclusive and, memorable. So, I encourage everybody to visit Hal's website, connect with him on social media. He's also active on Facebook and has a community there as well. Guys, let me know how this episode changed your thinking. Maybe it changed something that you view in your faith journey or your goals journey, your success journey of becoming a leader worth following because you're following the one who created you. That's the stick, isn't it? That's the at the end of the day, it's being a leader worth following because you are mirroring the characteristics of the one who created you. That is what it's all about. Guys, we will catch you on the next episode. Take care.